Today on Inspired Money.
I think we have just disillusioned ourselves with thinking that college is about learning. And I'll tell you in a second why I don't think that's true, but there's real practical implications for thinking that it is. And if you think that college is about learning, it fundamentally changes how you approach college. And I think it takes away from the practicality. It takes away from adopting these principles that we've been talking about this whole podcast. Mm-hmm. And it forces you into the library like I was, right? And away from the action and away from gaining real experiences with real marketability afterwards.
This is episode 8 with Kyle Winey, author of the book HACKiversity, The Secrets of Achieving More by Doing Less in College. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away. Inspired money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Show notes for today's show can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/008. Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management, a fiduciary investment advisor in its 24th year, serving institutions, individuals, and companies. We do a tremendous amount of research assessing risk and protecting against financial hurricanes. To educate yourself for free, subscribe to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm. I've heard people say that their number one fear is public speaking, and that number 2 is dying. Funny, right? What's your number one fear? I used to have the worst stage fright. My heart raced, my hands shook. Then about 15 years ago, I somehow committed to playing guitar in public. One of my personal victories was in 2012. I opened for one of my favorite groups, HAPA, at the Highline Ballroom in New York City. Just me, my guitar, and 400 new friends in the audience. It was kind of crazy, but you know what? I didn't die. I thrived. Even though I still get nervous, I can cross that off my most feared list. Today I'm the father of 3 kids, ages 9, 7, and 5. And I've got a big fear of paying for college. We all know that college can be expensive. It can also be kind of a controversial subject too. There are famous CEOs who think that you should skip college. PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel, Mark Cuban, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Did you know that billionaire Warren Buffett's 3 children did not go to college? I've set up 529 plans for my kids, and I advise that you should too. Check the show notes for a couple of articles that we've written and a link to download our 6 essential tips for 529 investors. Today, the odds are that kids are going to go to school. And given the high price tag of college, it's super important to make the right choices and to spend your time as efficiently and effectively as possible. Today's guest says his college experience taught him the rules he was playing by were broken. Everyone told him studying hard and scoring the best marks would land him his dream job. In reality, that didn't happen. So he wrote HACKiversity, a book that tells college students what to do and how to do it. In this episode, you'll learn what it means to play the extremes when it comes to picking your college, the GPA rule. Do GPAs have a diminishing return? How tweaking your goals and priorities can help you achieve more by doing less in college. Whether you're a student or no one, or parenting future students, I think you'll gain practical advice today. Now let's get inspired talking to author, podcaster, and attorney, Kyle Winey. Hey, Kyle, it's so good to talk to you again. Last time you were a little under the weather, but I'm glad that you can make the time to connect again.
Andy, thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for the second at-bat.
well, welcome back. And
it's good to be back.
Yeah, let's just jump right in. The first question that I like to start with is, what's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Yeah, I like this question. My first memory of money was for my 12th Christmas. I was 12 years old, and my grandparents asked me what I wanted for my Christmas present. And I ran through all the possibilities, toys, all that stuff. But I actually really didn't even want toys. The only thing I really wanted for my Christmas present was stock. I wanted stock. I wanted to own a portion of a company. Now, I remember that my grandfather went to his broker and he bought on my behalf 10 shares of Ford Motor Company. And it was one of the best Christmas gifts I ever got in my life. I think the value of it was, gosh, I don't know, maybe $100, couple $100 at the time. But I love the idea that I actually owned something. And then I was kind of building for a future. And I really liked that idea, particularly starting out so young. And so it was just became a game then. I could log on and look at the stock ticker for Ford and kind of have something to root for. So it was cool. And, I obviously could benefit then if it went up. So I was rooting for something with skin in the game. And that's kind of the way I like to do life. So
that is super unique.
Yeah, it was fun.
How did you even know about owning a stock when you were 12 years old?
I think because my grandfather, maybe. My grandfather talked about it. We had this one program also in my elementary school. It was called Save for America. And, my parents would give me, gosh, I don't know, maybe $3 or $5 or something a week to actually invest in this program. It was just a checking account or a savings account or something like that. But, the idea was that you would take a portion of what you have and you would save it. And it was great for me because my parents were giving me the money to save. So it wasn't, any skin off my back. But, my parents are, I think they just did a really good job and they aspired to all throughout my childhood. And that was to teach me to save. And I think they modeled that for me. My grandfather, like I said, also modeled that for me. But it was just kind of a way of life growing up. And I guess I just was kind of born with it too.
That is a super cool first memory of money. Do you still own those shares?
No. So I sold them. I sold them to pay for a Bike Across America trip about 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I had to liquidate some stock, but that's the point of owning stock, right? So you buy now and you kind of delay gratification for later, but when later comes and you want to do something really awesome, that's why you delayed gratification in the first place. So,
well, to realize that you can make your money work for you since age 12, that is a gift.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
So, Kyle, today you're practicing law, correct?
That's right.
And what area of practice and what firm? And actually, geographically, where are you?
Yeah. So I practice at a small boutique firm outside of Washington, D.C. The firm is called Sims Showers. And the kind of legal practice that I do is mostly business law. So as I mentioned, I've been infatuated with business ever since I was young. And so I do mostly business law now. So contracts, help people buy other businesses, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So related, you definitely have an interest in business. And I understand that you're concurrently building a brand for HACKiversity.
That's
Can
right.
you tell our listeners what HACKiversity is?
Yeah, absolutely. So HACKiversity started out with this kind of train wreck of a college career. So, maybe the listeners can glean from my upbringing already, but I come from kind of a working class family. Sure, my grandfather was buying some stock, but my parents were working class people, and so that kind of work ethic was always part of the family. And so my dad never went to college; he's a construction worker, and my mom did go to college, but she's a nurse, so her kind of college career track was very tracked. It was very narrow. So when I went to college, they had a really difficult time advising me, and my counselors at school, I come from a kind of small town, and so we didn't really have kind of career counselors, as it were, in our high school. So I really didn't know who to turn to college advice, but my parents just basically always said, work hard, get good grades, and everything will take care of itself. And so that's exactly the approach I adopted when I went to college. And so I worked really hard, got really great grades. I graduated at the top of my class from Penn State, the business school there. And I got to around senior year, and I am hoping that I receive this influx of job offers. And it got kind of toward the latter end of senior year, and I had approximately 0 job offers. I don't think employers even knew I existed. And I didn't realize how that could be, because I'd executed on this game plan that not just people told me worked really well. I mean, it was a lot of people told me worked really well, particularly older people, counselors, career advisors, even at Penn State, just get good grades, do what you have to do, and things will take care of itself. And I didn't understand why that wasn't working, because everyone promised that it did. And I was watching one of my fraternity brothers, who was one of the biggest slackers I knew at college. He would stay up late watching movies. He would sleep in late too, because he had been up all night watching movies. Mm-hmm. He was one of the best FIFA soccer video game players I'd ever met, because he, didn't go to class all that often. And when he did, he didn't really pay attention. And when he studied for an exam, he did kind of the least amount necessary. And he would skate by with B's. And, I was getting A's. But he and I both wanted to end up at the same place. So I'm a pretty ambitious guy, kind of type A guy. And I want to go to Wall Street, because I thought that's where all smart, ambitious business students go. And my buddy wanted to go to Wall Street too. But the thing was that he actually got a job offer from Wall Street. And I got no job offers, period, let alone from Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand how that was possible, because I did everything quote unquote right. And I was expecting that therefore I should be delivered the goods. I should have a job offer from places like Wall Street. But my fraternity brother did everything quote unquote wrong and still got there. And so I didn't understand why that was. And so that kind of juxtaposition, that kind of contrast, led me down this path. And I call my tactical, kind of pragmatic approach to college HACKiversity, because the idea is that you can hack college if you do the things that matter most.
So your train wreck, even today, even in retrospect, looking back, to many people, they would not define your career as a train wreck in college, don't you think? Mm-hmm. Is HACKiversity about redefining priorities and how you define success?
Yeah, I really think it is, Andy, because a lot of people, the metric that a lot of people, particularly college students and those looking to evaluate college students, use are GPAs. And I think the reason why is because they're easy to measure. You just look at a number and you say, okay, well, that's high. That means, the student must be smart and capable and qualified and all those things. And therefore, they must be a success. But GPAs in college is not the end game, right? I think we as a society has kind of, we've come to this position where we see college as an end in and of itself. So if you go to college right now, it's perceived as you kind of reaching this milestone and you are success, and whatever you do past that is just kind of gravy. But I don't see college that way. I don't see GPAs that way. I see them as being tools or instruments to help college students get to where they want to go. And often that does not require high GPAs. Let me say what else that doesn't require. That also doesn't necessarily mean that if you get a high GPA like I did, that you'll even end up where you want to be. A lot of people do really well in college, and they're kind of tracked or pressured into particular careers as a result. And those careers, those graduates don't even like in the first place. So, I think there's a lot to be said about redefining what it looks like to be a success coming out of college. And oftentimes that does not necessarily equate to having a high GPA or graduating with honors even.
So I'm curious, are you busy at this time of year when so many students have left high school, they've gone on to college, they've started that new experience? Are they eager to ask you how they should be doing things differently?
Yeah, it's funny, Andy. So I think about 3 weeks ago, it is now. I launched my book. I launched my book on Amazon, and in about 8 hours from my launch, it became a number one new release, and that blew my mind because I didn't realize that there would be such a demand for this. But after my launch, it took about let's see, this one student contacted me in about 5 days, and the student was in India.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anyone in India. I was like, how did you even come across my book and my work? And he said, Kyle, I really want your book, but I have to choose a college here in the next 48 hours. And I don't know what college to choose. And so if I wait for Amazon to ship me this book, I'll miss the deadline. So can you just chat with me on this Facebook group and kind of advise me? I said, absolutely. So, I think this problem is not just specific to the States. People all throughout the world are wrestling with this, particularly this time of the year, right? So a lot of people are trying to figure out how to navigate the beginning parts of college.
So HACKiversity isn't just about how to prioritize one's time and effort in college. The student in India was contacting you trying to select which school, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you cover that too in your book?
I do, Andy, because college selection is one part of what I call your personal brand. So, I think that what we offer to the workplace is filled with a bunch of different kind of facets about us. Sure, some of those things include your practical kind of abilities, the ability for you to provide value to the job, to the employer, that sort of thing. But you communicate those abilities through a variety of different ways. And one of those ways is the college that you go to or that you graduated from. But other ways include, what major did you choose? Some majors are more valuable than others. Other ways to communicate your value is because you have people who say you're really capable, so your network. So there's a variety of different ways to communicate your abilities to employers, to the job market. Mm-hmm. Certainly college selection is one of them, and it's a really important one, but it's not the only one.
So where do you stand on picking a Ivy League college? Well, I guess my question is this. The price tag of college is a huge topic these days because it's expensive.
Sure.
And it's reached such an extreme that I've heard many successful entrepreneurs who they don't even advocate that kids go to college. They say, oh, you should take that money instead of being $100,000 plus in debt. You should take that cash if you have it and start a business, and you're going to be better off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where I think we are trending, Andy, is more toward a personalized kind of college path for a variety of different students. So I think it makes sense for a lot of students not to go to college anymore, particularly in light of the cost, right? So if you are wanting to pursue a career where you make $30,000, then it doesn't make sense to pay $100,000 for a college education, particularly if you don't really need that degree in the first place to break into that industry. So to those students out there, absolutely, I would highly encourage them not to go. But other students, you do need that certificate. You do need that degree. Like for me, I'm an attorney. So for other attorneys out there or aspiring attorneys, you can't opt out of college. If you want to practice law, you need to go. And sure, there are certain ways to maximize your career prospects in the journey and to minimize your student loans. But the answer is not just to opt out completely. So I say all that to say we are entering an era where personalized career advice is going to be a premium, because we are leaving an era where a cookie cutter script was given to every high school senior, and that was, if you want to be a success, you go to college. And what we've seen as a result of that is we've had an enormous amount of student loans. It's up to over, I think, $1.3 trillion now. We've had students who aren't able to repay their loans. Around 40% of loans are in deferment of some sort, or have been in deferment over the term of their life. So we have been at least pushing students into a career path that they don't like, that they can't pay for, and that often they don't use. And so that era, like I said, is coming to an end. It's going to be more personalized. And in that personalized career track, there's going to be specific ways to play the game based on where you are and where you want to go. Now, I know you mentioned about getting an Ivy League education, and I would love to kind of give you my philosophy on the college selection process.
I'd love to hear it.
Sure. So let me couch this, Andy, by saying how I thought the college selection process worked. So when I graduated from Penn State, I applied to nearly 30 different law schools, and they range from Ivy League law schools all the way down to Tier 3 law schools, which is basically academic code for you're so bad you don't even get a number. So I cast the net really wide. And I got into the best school I got into was George Mason University, which was ranked 24 in the rankings at the time. And I got into some other schools, but another school I got into was the University of Baltimore, which is a Tier 3 law school, which again is code for you're really bad, we're not even going to give you a number. And so my thought process was, well, George Mason is ranked 24, and so that's, kind of pretty close to the top. So that therefore that must be a really good school, much better than the University of Baltimore, and whatever career prospects that I will generate from being a grad of Mason will be exponentially better than Baltimore. And the wrinkle was that I actually got a free ride to the University of Baltimore, and I actually had to pay my way through Mason. So that was kind of the trade-off.
Yep.
But I looked at this and I said, well, you know what? I'm not going to choose Baltimore because the reputation isn't nearly what Mason is. I'd rather pay for the brand name of Mason, and I'll go there. And so that's what I did. But I realized that I had been thinking about law schools kind of in a bell-shaped curve, as it were, where the value of the school is more or less evenly distributed throughout the rankings. So of course there's some tapering off when you start getting down to the bottom, but I thought it was kind of a gradual taper. That's not how it works at all. How it works is more of a barbell distribution. So you have the values of schools are really at the extremes. So there's a ton of value in going to elite colleges. Harvard, Yale, Stanford. If you can get into those schools, there's a variety of reasons why you should go there. Number one, being a Harvard grad, people, that says something special, right? And people really respond to that. And also, those schools have just massive endowments. So it's very unlikely you'll even pay 100 cents on the dollar of the tuition price anyway. But there's a ton of value in going to those elite schools. Conversely, there's a ton of value in going to schools on the other end of the spectrum, what I call kind of value schools.
And this is the counterintuitive part, sounds like.
Exactly. It's the counterintuitive part. So I looked at the University of Baltimore, right? And I said, why would I go to that school? It's a Tier 3 school. It doesn't make any sense for me to go there. But looking back, it made a ton of sense for me to go there. You know why? Because it was free. And if you're not playing in the elite world, if you're not on the other end of the spectrum playing in that sandbox, then you want to be on the other side of the spectrum, generating as much value as you can. And like I said, University of Baltimore, with my free ride offer, was that perfect play. Instead, what I did was I made a rookie mistake. I played in the middle, and the middle's not where you want to be. So I went to Mason, not an elite law school. It was 24 at the time, so pretty good, but not Harvard, right? Not Yale. But I kind of perceived it in a similar light as though it were. And I paid for it. I paid a lot of money for that degree, but I didn't get the value anywhere close to the value that I would have gotten by a Harvard degree or by a Stanford degree. And so that's why for students looking to choose specific colleges, I really encourage them to adopt this paradigm where you want to play on the extreme ends of the college ranking system, and you want to avoid the middle. And there are certainly other tactics you can adopt to maximize the value on that one end of the spectrum. Like I said, the value end of the spectrum.
Yep.
But the bottom line is that's where you want to be. You want to seek those value colleges if you're not in the elite world. And only 1% of students who attend college go to elite universities. So basically, when I say students should look for value opportunities, I'm really speaking to 99% of students.
Right. Yeah, super interesting. If you had gone to University of Baltimore, do you think that you could have gotten the job that you currently have?
Yeah, absolutely. Because at that point, well, let me rephrase this. It would not have been exactly the job, because I got the job because it was close to law school in Northern Virginia, right? So I got that particular job because I was interning there throughout school, and I would not have been able to intern there if I'd been in Baltimore just because of geographic reasons.
Yep.
But nevertheless, if you're talking about in terms of prestige, right? If I could have scored a similar job with similar prestige, then the answer is absolutely yes. And the reason why I say that so confidently is during one summer, I'd interned. Just for some context, the job that I got right out of school was I clerked, which means that I worked for some judges in a courthouse, and I worked for one of the most acclaimed judges in Virginia, one of the most acclaimed trial court judges in Virginia. He led a few Supreme Court committees that I was fortunate enough to serve on. But in any event, one summer I interned there before I came on full time, and one of my fellow interns was a student at a tier 3 school. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the student, and I couldn't help but think in my mind, like, what are you doing here? Right? Because I had given up a full ride opportunity at a tier 3 school so I could avail myself of job opportunities that weren't available to tier 3 students. But yet I was working alongside of a tier 3 law student for that summer.
Yep.
And the reason why, Andy, is because when you have a degree from kind of one of these value schools, one of these non-elite schools, the way you distinguish yourself then is not so much on the brand name of the school at that point. It's really on other different factors, mainly what kind of practical experiences or tools or abilities do you bring to the workplace?
Yep, makes sense. Those are super valuable insights onto school selection. Do you mind taking a step back for a minute? In the case of your experience at Penn State, you and your fraternity brother, at that point, you're looking at, you guys are both at the same school. Can you talk a little bit more about what you and your fraternity brother were doing specifically differently and why you guys had different results?
Sure. So I spent a lot of my time in the library. I just thought that I needed to score the best GPAs. And, I was at school in the midst of the Great Recession. And so a lot of people were struggling to find jobs. And I looked at my classmates and I said, well, I know how I will outcompete them. I'll just study harder. And so I went from, scoring I was like 3.9 is around where my GPA was hovering for a while. But then when I had that realization, I was like, all right, I just got to get 4.0s and just do that for the rest of my my college career. And that's what I did. And so I doubled down on my library time, in other words. And what my fraternity brother did was the exact opposite. He didn't study an ounce more. What he did was he would network with people. He would reach out to people in his industry. And he would ask them if they knew of any opportunities in the industry. And if they said no, then he would ask them to connect him with other people in the industry who might know of something. And so eventually what happened was he got an internship on Wall Street. And then that transitioned to a full-time job offer. And so he did a lot of networking, and he got his foot in the door through an internship. And that internship gave him the practical abilities to then kind of seamlessly transition into a full-time job. And so with me, if I tried to just plop right into a full-time job on Wall Street right out of college, I would have had a much harder onboarding time. And the reason why is because I didn't have that kind of build up with an internship. I was going straight from academia into the real world, and that would have been too abrupt of a shift that I think a lot of employers would have been hesitant, and in fact they were, to hire me.
Yeah, it sounds very logical and makes practical sense. As far as HACKiversity goes, since in that illustration that you just laid out, how important is it to know what you want to do? Because I figure the majority of students enrolling into their first year of college, the majority of them don't know what they want to do yet.
Andy, that's a great question. And the reason why it's such a great question is because I think it's an often overlooked aspect to college. But in my toolkit, that is one half of the equation. So that's the first step. This is kind of like a two-part process. The first step is figuring out what you want to do. And the second step is actually executing against that. And the college selection is in that second part. It's in the execution part. But you first have to figure out where you're going, right? It doesn't make sense to set sail and have no destination, but so many college students do. And so I think it is just inescapably critical to college success. Otherwise, what you do is you kind of wander through and you dabble in different classes, right? You don't have a clear sense of direction, so you don't know who to network with. You don't know what opportunities to explore. You don't know what classes to take. You're just kind of lost at sea. And so I think one of the best ways that I recommend students kind of approach this self-awareness process, as I call it, is through this idea of experimentation. And the idea is that you dabble in things with the intention of getting quick, rapid, and cheap feedback. And you can do that through internships. You can do that through different classes. You can do that through different self-assessment tests. But you really need to generate an idea of what you want to do and where you're going before you try to execute on that, because you'll just be lost if you don't. And so many students are.
So I'm assuming you'd be advocating that students be, if it's possible, to be dabbling in high school, right? Because the earlier you start, the better.
Absolutely, because here's the thing, Andy. When you hit campus day one of freshman year, the clock begins to run. And so there are certain expectations that come along with a 4-year college track, right? So, if you want to be super successful, here's a good example. You gotta have an internship by junior year, okay? And if you want to achieve even more success, you'll have an internship sophomore year, maybe even freshman year. But again, in order to really leverage those internships, you're going to have to figure out early what industry you want to pursue, what job you want to pursue, what career. And that's why, like you suggested, high school is a great opportunity to do that. And even taking a year off, a gap year. And and gap year doesn't necessarily mean that you have to backpack around Europe and spend a lot of money. I mean, it can just mean, hey, I'm going to work in the real world for a year and just see what I like, see if this career path resonates with me. And if it does, then I'll go pursue it for 4 years at college. And if it doesn't, well, the worst thing that happens is I made some money,
Right.
But it's a lot better than having absolutely no idea what you want to do and go to college and spend 4 years and $100,000 and end up with a degree that you don't like.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And that's not to say that people cannot figure out like what their area of study is ultimately going to be in their freshman and sophomore year of college. It's still possible, but the sooner you have a sense of where you want to end up after college, then the better, because then you can start getting your ducks in a row and lining up those internship opportunities and trying to network within the industry that you're interested in.
That's right. And I think an important point to mention is that a lot of students think that whatever they're pursuing in college means that that's what they're going to do, quote unquote, for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. That's just not true at all. So I'm not suggesting that college students need to figure out, when they are 18 years old, freshman year, what they're going to do for the rest of their life. I'm just suggesting that they need to find out as early as possible into the college game what they want to do to set them up for success, 5-10 years after graduation, because once you have a marketable resume, you can take that and leverage that into different roles, different occupations, sometimes even different industries. But there are ways to maximize your flexibility too, in terms of what kind of markets you can enter. So all that to say, it is important to understand as early as possible where you're going, but just because you have a vision doesn't mean you're locked into that vision for the rest of your life.
Makes a lot of sense. I love what you're doing because you are really replacing I think, generations of what is it? It's the guidance counselors across our country who may not be giving the most practical information, and that's the void you're trying to fill. And every year you've got a huge potential market that is teachable and that you can reach. You wrote your book, and I know that you also have a podcast. Is that pretty much the HACKiversity brand right now, the book and the podcast?
Yeah, it is, Andy. And so my strategy is first to build awareness to the HACKiversity name, but also what it stands for. And that is just through content production right now. And the reason why that's so important, I think, is because, frankly, a lot of people are reticent to adopt what I'm doing. And the reason why is because you have a lot of old guard people who have all the power right now. So you have these school administrators, you have these teachers, you have these guidance counselors that have done the same thing for the past 30, 40 years, which is to tell every student to go to college. Mm-hmm. And they are resistant to change because we're just creatures of habit, number one, but also because it's worked in the past, right? It's worked for so long. And so for someone to come along and say, hey, this isn't working anymore, is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. I just had I was talking to one teacher, and she goes, Kyle, are you telling me that GPAs have kind of a diminishing return? And I said, yeah, I am. And she goes, well, I can't tell my students that because GPAs are the way in which I control them. And
can you talk a little bit about the diminishing return with the GPA and maybe within the context again of you and your fraternity brother, or just, sure, I guess in a practical sense, what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So in my book, I refer to what I call the GPA rule. And so I'll tell you what it is, but let me just caveat it with, if you're a student who is interested in pursuing graduate school, the GPA rule that I'm about ready to state does not necessarily apply to you. And the reason why is because the graduate school admissions office still plays by the old ways. So you have to play by their ways. But in any event,
Got it.
For most students who are intending to just enter the job market right after college, really all you need is around a 3.0 to a 3.2. And the reason why is because that's sort of the threshold level which employers want to see. That tells employers, hey, this person's, competent, they're capable. And then what you can do is you can invest the time that it would otherwise take for you to get a higher GPA, which, by the way, would be a lot more hours because there's more effort required to generate the results when you kind of get to the top of the spectrum. What you can do is you can instead reallocate that time and that effort and that energy into other things that matter a lot more, such as finding internships or networking with people, or building something that you find interesting, that can make you an influencer or a spokesperson in the industry that you want to pursue. So kind of disrupting the pattern, as it were.
Yeah.
Those are some high leverage things. So that's what I would do if I had to do college over again, right? I wouldn't spend that extra hour, that extra 5 hours in the library. I would say, you know what, a 3.2 or a 3.0 is good enough here. And I'm just going to get out and interact with real people and do real things that matter instead of locking myself in the library. And again, that's exactly what my fraternity brother did, right? He spent time talking with people in the industry. He spent time looking for internships, and he got both. And as a result, he leveraged his way into a career, into a job that everyone wanted. At least I did.
Super valuable. Where do you stand on area of study? Say something like engineering or the sciences versus a liberal arts education?
Well, first, I think if you are an engineer, it makes perfect sense for you to pursue engineering, or if you want to be an engineer, it makes perfect sense for you to pursue engineering. But if you are kind of unsure what you want to do, if you are interested in perhaps pursuing engineering or something in the hard sciences, or even if you're not, I still recommend students to pursue what I call career-ready majors. And what those are majors that develop the tools and the skills that allow the student to plug and play in a job right after graduation. And majors such as STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, those are some of the career-ready majors, as I call it, that develop those skills that allow students to plug and play right after graduation. And as a result, those majors are highly marketable and highly valuable in the marketplace. And the same is not true for liberal arts majors. So one of the stigmas that a liberal arts major has is that those majors are primarily designed for people wanting to pursue graduate school. And the reason why is because those majors often don't develop the more technical, the more critical thinking skills that a lot of employers want to see. And so that's why you'll see liberal arts majors really, really struggle out of the gate to get a job. And so, no, I don't recommend that students major in a liberal arts major unless that you have some ultra compelling reason. Mm-hmm. I strongly recommend students to major in, like I said, a career-ready major, which often are these STEM majors. Even if you don't want to be an engineer, I think it still makes perfect sense to major in engineering or major in math, and perhaps do a business career track or something in technology or something. There's such wide applications for these majors. Like I said at the beginning, just because you pick a certain major doesn't mean you're going to do that for the rest of your life. And when I said that there's ways to kind of maximize your flexibility, this is precisely what I'm talking about. You can choose a major. It doesn't lock you into a career, but instead gives you flexibility when you graduate, so you can kind of choose the career track you want to go down. And then when you're into that career track, you also still maintain the flexibility because of your background to kind of hop around a little bit more.
Well, what I'm hearing is that when you're in college, the next step, if it's not going on to graduate school, it's to land a job. And then once you land that job, you're gaining practical experience, and that's going to be something marketable so that you can change directions if you want to. But like that's sort of the different stages that I see, right? It's like you got to land the job. Once you have a job, then you're gaining skills, whatever you're doing. And then you can take a leap and go into another industry, or take a shift, or go back to school. But whatever it is, that work experience is key, and you've got to get the job, and you have to do the right things in order to land the right job.
Yeah, that's totally right, Andy. And if I can just expound upon that for a quick second.
Yeah, sure.
I think we have just disillusioned ourselves with thinking that college is about learning. And I'll tell you in a second why I don't think that's true, but there's real practical implications for thinking that it is. And if you think that college is about learning, it fundamentally changes how you approach college. And I think it takes away from the practicality. It takes away from adopting these principles that we've been talking about this whole podcast. Mm-hmm. And it forces you into the library like I was, right? And away from the action, and away from gaining real experiences with real marketability afterwards. So all that to say, I think there's practical implications for thinking that college is about learning. So here's why I think it's not about learning, to emphasize that point. There right now is a ton. We are awash with information. I just saw that if you would print out every single page on Wikipedia, it would take an entire football length worth of bookshelves just to house all of that. There are hundreds of hours of how-to tutorials on YouTube. There are free lectures right now from Ivy League professors that are absolutely free and absolutely accessible to anyone. And the great irony is that students are willing to pay an arm and a leg for a Harvard education, but they can receive free Harvard lectures from real Harvard professors, but they choose not to. No, you don't hear all these rumblings and all this kind of sense of urgency to go online and hear from a Harvard professor. And the reason why is because the value of college is not what comes from a Harvard professor's mouth. It's not what comes from the learning that occurs in the classroom. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't important or that students don't learn while they're in the classroom. Of course they do. But that doesn't mean that's the purpose of college. Because again, if the purpose of college were really to learn, there are so many more economical ways to learn that are available to students right now that they choose not to do. And furthermore, if college were really about learning, there was this great study that was released about 7 years ago that showed that college freshmen, after their first year, over half of them make absolutely no improvement in their critical thinking abilities. And when you get to the end of their sophomore year, that number doesn't change for around 40% of them. So, a little bit under half. Again, still doesn't change. And so if college were truly about learning, students are getting an awful deal on it because not much of it is happening. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not here to make policy. I'm just saying the facts are what they are. And students, if you play your cards right, you can thrive in this environment. But I think a way that we undermine ourselves is to think that college, again, is about learning when it's not. You can learn in a variety of ways. You don't need to go to college to do it. Instead, college is about getting a job. It's about getting a credential that signals something to the marketplace.
Yep. Yeah, and it's super interesting. And for the benefit of the Inspired Money listeners, I found recently, not only can you listen to like Ivy League professors giving lectures on all kinds of subject matter, from business to whatever you want to learn, I think field of study, you can find it. But even Google brings in like subject matter experts that give talks on their Google campus, and you can find those online. I've watched some of those and I found them fascinating. They're like authors, there are all kinds of successful business people who go there and they interview them. And it's tremendous.
Google Talks or TED Talks? All
it's Google
stuff,
Talks,
right?
I guess. It's sort of like TED Talks, right? They just bring them on to Google campus and the Google employees can go listen.
That's right.
I can tell that you put so much thought into, looking back at your life, and it sounds like really you're trying to put down on paper and in words like things that you would do differently, right? It's
that's right.
It's lessons that you learned yourself and very practical lessons. You wrote this book. How do you define success now that you're in the workforce? You're a lawyer, you're practicing law, you're also an entrepreneur because you wrote this book, you have a podcast. How do you define success?
Yeah, that's a good question. Andy, I used to really define success as a results-based definition. And I've really, in law school, I came to reject that. I don't think success can be measured by what we necessarily achieve on a day-to-day basis. Instead, I really think it is about the process. I think life is about the process, about embracing the process. And really so, as a result, I really think that success is about trying to become the best me possible. And it's really a result, or a process-based mentality. Carol Dweck calls it a growth mindset. So I really try to lean into this idea of what can I do every single day to make me better? And if I am embracing that process, then I think no matter what the results are, that in and of itself is a success.
Right. No, I love that. And where do you see yourself like 10 years from now? Do you have a target goal in mind?
Yeah. Well, I would love to build out my goal, and this is what I'm aspiring toward right now, is to build out a tech platform that allows students the ability to receive real, practical, and personalized college advice from recent college graduates who understand what life is like inside the new economy for that particular industry. And there is just, the advice that students are given right now is from, it was relevant in the 1980s. And so I am super passionate about fixing this problem. It's a real problem with real consequences, and it affects just millions and millions of people. So I would like to build out a scalable product that provides real value to real people.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I think that you're also potentially magnifying the impact through your message, because ultimately all of those students are in the workforce and that impacts the U.S. economy. So you have grand, I think your message can really spread into many different places, which is amazing. Where can the Inspired Money listener find you and what you're up to?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. They can find me at KyleWiney.com. That's KyleWiney. They can check out my HACKiversity podcast. I'm on iTunes. Or just shoot me an email. So I'm at Kyle@KyleWiney.com. Or tweet at me. Find me on Instagram. I'm all over the interwebs. So check me out.
That is awesome. And I think you failed to mention Amazon to find your book.
That's right. You can pick up my book on Amazon, which about 5 days after its release, became a #1 bestseller on Amazon, which I'm super, super grateful for.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
Sharing your very positive message about how students can improve their experience at college and hopefully improve their experience once they've graduated college. That'll be the report card.
Well, Andy, thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. What were your favorite inspired money moments? I like that Kyle is not only looking back at his life to ask himself what he'd do differently, but he put it down in writing and published a book to help future students who can learn from his mistakes. In my opinion, I think Kyle's trying to tell us in the real world, it's not just about book smarts, but it's also about street smarts. Rather than spending all of your time in the library to achieve a near perfect grade, it's more effective to develop your contacts, land an internship, and gain other skills. Become an influencer or build something. I love that Kyle said that he tries to be the best me possible. He spoke about Carol Dweck's growth mindset and figuring out what you can do every day to make yourself better. Thanks, Kyle, for the very practical tips about college selection, choosing a major, and how to prioritize one's time. Coming up next time on Inspired Money. One of the first things that I saw was Mark Benioff of Salesforce tweeting, Hawaii's LT Smooth teaches kids how to code and play music, the importance of living an ethical life. And I've seen you on Facebook performing with U2's Bono, with Stevie Wonder. You have photos with Mary J. Blige, Lenny Kravitz, Will.i.am. I think the list goes on and on.
So, yeah, while we're on that subject, Mark Benioff is my hero. I can't tell you how that man has inspired me to be more excited about what I do. Mark Benioff is responsible for all those people in my life. I mean, he really is my inspiration. I hands down. The man is brilliant. The man is loving. The man is giving. I mean, what more can I say? But I'm so thankful for him to be in my life.
That's LT Smooth, a motivational speaker and award-winning musician. You will not believe his inspirational story of achieving a successful musical career after overcoming a childhood riddled with addiction and crime. Hey, before you go, may I ask you a favor? If you like the show, the best thing you can do is subscribe, rate, and review us at iTunes by going to inspiredmoney.fm/iTunes. For the next 10 reviews, send me an email when you're done. Tell me your iTunes username, and I'll send you an autographed CD of Jim Kimo West and Ken Emerson's Slackers in Paradise. All of the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Mahalo, Kimo. Want to be an inspired moneymaker? Do something that scares you. Do something that's going to make you better. Do something to give back in a bigger way to the world. Tweet or email me what you're up to. Until next time, find your inspiration and run with it.